cream teas, bunting, the local shop, quaint church spires, and games on the green. The sights and sounds of the classic village scene.
Everyone has their idea of the perfect village. I know I do.
But I've lived in a village for almost 40 years.
Come on, girls!
And I know there's more to village life than the picture postcard suggests. So I'm setting off again to explore the world of our smallest communities.
Don't you envy me?
I'll travel by land.
It's colder up here, Hedge.
By water.
He's a biggie. He might nip.
And by air.
Heavens above.
To find the characters and communities that have made a big impact. My window on the past is the Batsford Guides, whose words and pictures from the 1930s tell a story of village life. But I want to find out what it means to be a village today.
Oh, they're going to throw him into the sea.
And discover just why we're so passionate about this quintessentially British institution.
Beautiful, isn't it?
There are more than 10,000 villages up and down the country. And from the plains of East Anglia to the highlands of Scotland, they come in a great many guises. On this journey, I'm heading to some of our most rugged coastal communities, nestled amongst the rocks, cliffs and harbours of Devon and Cornwall. Fishing, farming and mining were once the bedrock of communities here. But now that heritage helps draw 5 million of us each year to this charming region.
I haven't been to this part of the country since I was very small, so I'm very keen to read what my Batsford says about it. Towering headlands, rushing streams, precipitous cliffs, woods rising from the water's edge. Yes, they do. It's extraordinary. It is one of the finest stretches of coast scenery in England. Well, I totally agree with that.
This stunning coastline was reflected in the evocative illustrations of my guides, which also captured scenes of traditional village life. Fishermen and their boats, market day in the square. But the customs and traditions of this Celtic region often go unnoticed as we breeze through on our holidays. So I'm crossing the southwest peninsula in search of this region's unique identity and the people who take pride in keeping local traditions alive. My first stop is a village in Devon that is familiar to me, or so I've been informed.
I have been to Combe Martin before. My mother told me. A long, long time ago. Heaven knows what it was like then. I can't remember anything about it at all. I just liked the name, really. Combe, Devonian for valley.
And what a valley it is, one which has given the village an improbably long and thin outline. Combe Martin stretches for 1.5 miles, all the way to the sea. It's no surprise, then, that the village has the feel of a classic British seaside resort. Life hasn't always been so peaceful, though.
In years gone by, Combe Martin was attractive for another reason.
In the 13th century, the village struck gold. Well, silver, actually. The hills overlooking Combe Martin soon became peppered with royal silver mines. Mining continued on and off for 600 years, right through until 1880. But the area of the old mine shafts is still guarded today.
Hello. Come on, then. I've got a new friend. This is Steve. Steve, do you want to come and say hello? Yeah. Oh, yes. All right. Nice to see you.
More welcoming is Mitch Warburton, who, along with a group of 5 fellow mining enthusiasts, uncovered an old shaft 30 years ago and decided to reawaken Combe Martin's mining tradition.
This is the mine.
This is the shaft to Harris's mine. If you just stand there, you can look down.
Can I? Ah! Gosh. Have you been down there, Mitch?
Oh, yes. Used to work down there every Sunday morning.
For fun?
Yeah, for fun.
And how deep is this?
Fathom 6 feet. And this one goes down to the 28 fathom level. This is what we get out, Penny.
Oh, it's pretty.
Yes, it's very pretty, but it's not silver.
Oh, come on. Of course it is.
It's an ore called galena.
Galena.
Which is mostly lead. But here in Combe Martin, the percentage of silver within that lead is higher than anywhere else in the country.
When it was fully functioning hundreds of years ago, would it have been a very rich mine?
Yes. Combe Martin was the richest per ton dug. This was one of the king's royal mines. And when they hit on a good place here, they really did. It was bonanza.
Devon and Cornwall are famous for tin and copper mining. But during the reign of Edward I in the 13th century, miners were brought from Derbyshire and South Wales to extract Combe Martin silver. The tradition continued 250 years later when Elizabethan miners dug even deeper. And in 1701, an assay office was opened in Exeter, stamping local silverware with a hallmark containing a distinctive 3-towered turreted castle.
Now tell me, you chaps who go down now, are you going to make your fortune?
No, we just do it for the love of it.
Do you?
And we do it to try to find out how the people did it before.
So really, it's sort of archaeology for you, isn't it?
It is big-scale archaeology.
None of the villagers of Combe Martin ever got rich from mining. Under laws which stretch back to the Norman conquest, a precious metal like silver was considered the property of the crown. Today, there are just a few silver items remaining in the village.
This is an Ellis brooch that was made from the last plate of silver from the Combe Martin and North Devon Mining Company. It says on it, pure Combe Martin silver. Then you've got your stamps.
Yeah.
Tells you the date, 1847 it was made.
Gosh. Just at the beginning of Victoria's reign.
Yes.
It's lovely. I hope when I come again, you'll have maybe a small medallion
one
that I could
take away. We'll see what we can do about that.
on the date.
Mining, and the silver itself, has all but disappeared from this village. But there is a Combe Martin tradition that the villagers have kept very much alive. In fact, it's a cause that unites the whole community.
As far as I understand it, these are the grenadiers. And they're coming to hunt for the Earl of Roane, who's somewhere up in the woods.
Follow me.
Each spring, the villagers reenact, in spectacular fashion, the capture of the Earl of Tyrone. The 17th century Earl was a leading figure in the Irish resistance to English rule. In 1607, he took flight from his homeland and, legend has it, he was then shipwrecked near Combe Martin.
Come back!
The villagers sent the local grenadiers to hunt him down.
Grenadiers!
These days, once he's been caught, the masked Earl is frog-marched into the village to meet his fate.
It's awfully loud. What do they do?
Shoot him.
But once dead, a horse appears. Yes, that is a horse. A magical horse, in fact, with the power to revive the hapless Earl. Back on his feet, the Earl can now be marched the full length of the high street. And in case anyone in the village missed the key moment, the Earl is shot again. In fact, the poor chap is shot a total of 17 times.
I must get out of the way. Oh!
Now, all this might seem a little grisly, but this macabre celebration is what we British do to mark the capture of an enemy of the state. Just as we burn effigies of Guy Fawkes on bonfire night, so the villagers of Combe Martin hunt down the Earl of Roan. Both men were 17th century Catholics who challenged the authorities and lost. 400 years on, even the Earl of Tyrone himself would scarcely believe he could unite an entire Devon village like this. After much dancing and drinking, the procession finally reaches the beach.
We've been doing it for 3 hours now. And those dear ladies are still dancing. See, the grenadiers are all lined up. So I think something rather nasty is going to happen. They've shot him again. Oh, they're going to throw him into the sea. Here comes the Earl.
In our modern world of health and safety, I'm pleased to report that it's an effigy of the Earl that is dispatched to a watery grave.
Ah, here he goes! Hooray! Just to ensure he's finished off, they're throwing stones at him. It's called hitting a man when he's down.
It's most curious how this custom ever started. There's no evidence that the Earl was ever shipwrecked at Combe Martin. It's believed he ended his days safely on the continent. But why let the truth get in the way of a colourful community ritual and a jolly good party with your neighbours?
It's the most extraordinary evening, isn't it? And it's all about community, it's about identity. This only happens in Combe Martin.
Next, I reach Cornwall and step onto the country's most dramatic stage.
This feels as though you're falling into the sea.
And I relive a childhood holiday.
People surfing. I never tried that. It wasn't here in the 40s.
I'm following my guides through the villages of the far southwest in search of the customs that characterize life and lives in this part of the world. Devon and Cornwall are 2 counties rich in history, with strong identities forged from their Celtic origins. Just short of the Cornish border, I'm approaching a village that typifies the steely determination of the communities in this region. Clovelly is a village of some 80 homes that has clung to the North Devon cliffs for at least 8 centuries. But that proud history has given this village a future, because these days Clovelly is undoubtedly an attraction.
When you arrive, you can't actually see the village. It's a car park and this large building. And though Clovelly is a real working village with residents, the general public, that's you and me, have to pay to go in. I don't think I'd ever paid to enter a village before.
Unless you actually live here, for the past 27 years, paying to enter has been the only way to see Clovelly.
Thank you, that's my ticket. Is it in there?
But once inside, a picture book seaside community awaits. A single cobbled street is lined with dozens of immaculately presented cottages. Many are made of stone and cob, the mix of earth, sand and straw that's so typical of the area. They run for half a mile as the street plunges 400 feet to the sea. 2 centuries ago, J.M.W. Turner and later Charles Dickens came here. And it's no surprise that Sir Brian Cook Batsford, illustrator of my guidebooks, paid Clovelly a visit too. It's a captivating place, but I fancy life here has always been something of a challenge.
Today it's Provisions Day in Clovelly. They are bringing in supplies for the grocer's shop. It isn't Switzerland, there isn't any snow on the ground, but it's all done by sledge. In Clovelly, you learn how to adjust your tools to fit the job.
Tricky steps.
By all rights, these sheer cliffs are no place for a village. But Clovelly grew because of what lies below, one of the most sheltered natural bays on the North Devon coast. For centuries, the village came alive each autumn as the bay became the spawning ground for huge shoals of herring. Up to 100 wooden boats, known as picarooners, once filled the small harbour here. They could bring in up to 9,000 so-called silver darlings on each fishing trip. But today, I'm on the water with fishermen John Glover and Stephen Perham in Clovelly's only remaining wooden fishing boat.
This is my father's boat. It's now my boat. She's been in the family for over 40 years.
And what's she called?
It's called Neptune. Neptune. Most people think I'm mad for hanging on to her, really. Most people say, I should get a fiberglass boat.
Will you ever?
No, I doubt it. I always say, well, this is my longest relationship, this boat. Nothing's ever lasted as long as me and this girl here.
Oh, well, there we are, you see. I think that's a good enough reason. I really do. Wonderful.
Clovelly's fishing community has changed out of all recognition in the past century. The village lost both boats and fishermen during the war. Since then, herring quotas and our preference for eating meat over oily fish have helped kill off Clovelly's age-old tradition.
That's terrific.
It brings them up. That's all that matters.
Today, Stephen spends much of his time catching shellfish.
He's a biggie. He might nip.
The herring he catches out of season is more often used as bait.
We catch the herring in the winter, and we just salt them down so they're not wasted.
I was going to say, do the crabs mind them salted, but it's the sea, isn't it? Yes.
Yeah, they don't mind them salted. It's vinegar they don't like.
The prize Clovelly catch now is lobster.
I say, am I bringing you luck?
I'll bring you out more often.
She's really fine.
She is lovely, isn't she?
Isn't she beautiful?
She is a
So
beauty.
you'll keep her, will you?
Yeah, she'll stay.
I never realized their tails were as blue.
Them rock lobsters, they're quite dark.
Yes.
If they're in deeper water, they'd be paler than that.
Oh, really?
It's an absolute pleasure to see folk like Stephen and John who are keeping Clovelly's traditions alive. Back on dry land, I want to understand how this hardy fishing community made the leap to idyllic coastal attraction. To get to the bottom of that, I have to go back to the top, which means climbing the half-mile-long cobble street, complete with 30% gradient. Not a place for heels, is Clovelly. The village has retained a curious characteristic of its medieval past. It's privately owned. The residents are all tenants. John Rouse's family has owned the village for the past 3 centuries. And today John juggles a tricky role. He's part lord of the manor, part modern businessman.
It's a fun challenge to have because on the one hand, Clovelly is a community. I mean, I want to try and keep it as a living community, so condition of tenancy is that people live in their cottages throughout the year. And on the other hand, it's expensive to maintain cottages built on a 400-foot precipice with lots of wonderful architectural details. And so one's got to make the sums add up. And
Right.
I'm fortunate we have lots of visitors who come and help contribute towards the maintenance of the village.
Right.
Potential Clovellians are interviewed to make sure they will fit in, and tenants have to know what they're letting themselves in for, right down to simple domestic chores. This is something Clovelly resident Baisha knows all about.
The weekly shop, yeah. It's something that you certainly consider. Not only your weekly shop, but if you sat there and you want to order a washing machine or a bed, you kind of just got to think about it a little bit more. People come and say, oh, look, guys, I've got a washing machine being delivered tomorrow. Anybody out there? And everybody helps. I'm with the kids, struggling down the street with my shopping, and someone just takes off my hand on my doorstep. And, you have got that close community, but without it being too invasive, and you've got your own privacy as well, which I think is just the best of both worlds, really.
Instead of drifting away with the fishing industry, Clovelly has survived by moving with the times. Fewer herring, perhaps, but many more fans from all over the country.
This really is a very special place. And shows, I think, more than anywhere else I've been, how life used to be. But of course, we're in the 21st century now, and it's got to be looked after. Tourism helps enormously, but it's still a living, working village, and with its own beauty, is just about able to pay for itself.
I'm following the coast further west and crossing into our most southwesterly county. But just into Cornwall, I can't resist stopping in Bude, which, unlike Clovelly, has been a popular seaside destination for generations.
Now, I know Bude is a town, not a village, but as we were passing, I saw the signpost, and I thought I must pop in, because in the 1940s, I came here on holiday with my mother, which must have been the most wonderful escape from war-torn, war-ravaged London. I've got a photo here of my mother and me paddling. She looks so glamorous. She was wonderful. I was quite small, and I was wearing a very nice seersucker swimming costume. Most small children had those. Gosh.
But in those days, I doubt I was paying much attention to the local landscape.
The sand, the rocks, Dogs playing on the beach. People surfing as well. I never tried that. It wasn't here in the 40s.
How fascinating to return and rekindle such memories of beautiful Bude after all these years. Can it really be that long ago? Cornwall boasts more coastline than any county in the country. Visitors often underestimate distances along this seemingly endless coast. My next destination is as far from London as the Scottish borders. Tucked just around the headland from Land's End, it's a remote village which, just like Bude, built its reputation during a bygone era. Long before satellites, radio and telephones, Porthcurnow's southwesterly location saw it become an unlikely hub of the British Empire. From 1870 onwards, Porthcurnow was the terminus of submarine telegraph cables. Using Morse code, the cables allowed Britain to communicate in quick time with the world. It was a staggering breakthrough, and as the largest telegraph station in the world, Porthcurnow was at the forefront of global technology. A simple hut was where the cables broke British soil. It's where I'm meeting Porthcurnow guide, Rudy Topsy.
Rudy, say I wanted to send something to India.
In the early days, it took 9 minutes to get from Britain to India. You would leave Porthcurnow, go to Carcaveos, from Carcaveos to Gibraltar, and from Gibraltar to Malta, from Malta to Alexandria, to Aden, and then to Bombay.
In 9 minutes.
In 9 minutes.
At each stop, the simple Morse message was picked up, retyped and sent onwards. Not exactly high-speed broadband, but nonetheless a giant leap for mankind.
So the actual telegraphers must have been terribly, terribly quick.
Yes, and they had to be very accurate as well.
By the early 1900s, a substantial community was required to keep the station running, and in their off-duty moments became resourceful at providing their own entertainment. In 1929, an outdoor performance of A Midsummer Night's Dream proved to be a great success, and it led to the creation of Porthcurnow's other great claim to fame, the Minack Theatre. Now, I've seen 1 or 2 theatres in my time, but this place really stands out.
It's wonderful.
In the 1920s, Rowena Cade, owner of the Minack Headland, had provided space for several productions. She had always been a dab hand at making costumes, but she set herself a new challenge. She would build a theatre. But this is no ordinary theatre. Hewn out of the Cornish granite, the stage and seating has been built onto the rocks in this most breathtaking of settings. Every performance at the Minack is quite literally a cliffhanger.
The first performance here was in 1932, and the production was The Tempest. Rather appropriate for this wild and woolly setting. I was in The Tempest at Stratford, my first season. I played a tree. I don't think I'd want to repeat my performance here. I might get blown into the sea.
From the 1930s onwards, the Minack has developed and grown along with its reputation. There's now a full programme of productions from April through to September. Each one has to embrace the challenges of this unique alfresco setting.
Normally in a theatre, The stage is raked. That means slanted that way. This feels as though you're falling into the sea. It does. It goes downhill. So this is backstage, the way the actors get from one side of the stage to the other. I just hope none of them have any vertigo. I think this is the green room. Quite comfy. You can have a rest here between scenes. Then you think, oh, gosh, can I hear my cue? You get up and you go on.
The Minack is as dramatic as any of its productions. But for me, the true marvel of this venue is that Rowena Cade built it herself. She fetched sand, carried beams, and poured cement, working during the winter off-season to repair and improve her theatre. Having started aged 38, she was still at it almost half a century later. Well, most of the time. Phil Jackson actually knew this one-woman wonder and has run Rowena's beloved theatre since 1990.
What was she like?
She always reminded me of my primary school headmistress, actually. She was a very sort of forceful, upright lady. Didn't suffer fools gladly, but very self-deprecating.
She was a hands-on lady.
She was very much hands-on. All the carving, and you'll see around the place, was all done by Rowena. She would just pick the right moment, go with a screwdriver and do all her creative designs in it.
I love it. It's wonderful.
Yeah. What we have here now is a set that Rowena constructed herself. In 1972, you'll see over there. She was 79 when she built that. Last thing she actually built was a Juliet balcony for a production of Romeo and Juliet, and she was 81 when she built that.
Well, God bless Rowena. I think it's magic. I really do.
It is special.
You can't help but be impressed by this woman's vision. And with 250,000 visitors every year, the Minack Theatre continues Porthcurno's tradition as a tiny Cornish village with a global reputation.
The more I travel around this region, the more I'm learning about the people who live here. They're a hardy bunch. Miners, fishermen, people like Rowena Cade, a little lady who did physically demanding work building this place in order to create something. They don't seem to worry about the conditions or the weather. They just get on with it. I think it's wonderful.
Next, I'm exploring a most unexpected Cornish tipple.
When I look at my camellias, I think, if you tried, you could be tea.
And I visit a unique site where the Cornish have congregated.
Someone very recently got married here. Lovely.
I'm travelling the narrow roads of Cornwall, a part of the country that, for many, is simply an enchanting holiday destination. But as I'm discovering, it's also a place full of custom and tradition, even down to the local place names.
There's a 17th century rhyming couplet. By tree, poll and pen, ye shall know all Cornish men.
Those prefixes are all words from the Cornish language. Tree means a settlement, poll is a pond, and pen a hill or headland. One area packed with trees, polls and pens is the Tregothnan estate near Truro. The Boscawen family has lived here for nearly 700 years and has created the largest private gardens in Cornwall. These 100 acres bask in the warm, moist air of the Gulf Stream and have helped introduce rhododendron and camellias to this country.
What a beautiful, beautiful garden. And like all great gardens, the water area is superb. But it isn't standing still, this estate. It's introduced a new plant.
In 1999, the estate launched a fresh initiative, growing something usually associated with China and India: tea. Tea was first imported to this country in the 1600s, and we now drink 165 million cups every day. Tregothnan is hoping to take a chunk of that market. Its plantation now covers 80 acres, and Neil Bennett is the head gardener.
The original plants came from Darjeeling back in 1999.
Really?
Yes.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it the soil, is it the weather that makes it so easy to grow?
No, it's because we're very similar to Darjeeling, actually. So in
Really?
terms of rainfall, temperature and soil pH, we're very, very similar to Darjeeling. We're experts now on the tea family. This is all from the same genus, which is Camellia. So this is actually a camellia.
I shall never look at a camellia in the same way.
Right.
When I look at my camellias, I think, if you tried, you could be tea.
Exactly. Well, how many people know they're drinking a camellia?
So which part is the tea?
Okay, so if you want to make black tea or green tea, you would want to pluck 2 leaves and a bud. That's called a flush.
A flush of tea.
A flush of tea. So from April to about September, every couple of weeks, we can cut all the flush off. If you want black tea, you let it wither, and then you roll it. If you want green tea, you just cut out the rolling process, because you don't want it bruised.
Of course.
If you want white tea, this is just the bud.
So that's expensive.
Yes, and this is why it's called white tea, because of the little white downy leaves.
Oh, I see. Which do you prefer? Green, black or white, or are you not allowed to say?
Black, I would say.
On its own?
No, with milk.
With milk?
I'm a farmer's son, I love milk.
Sitting outside with a cup of tea, typically British, but of course we all know that the tea comes from the other side of the world. So it's nice to know that in this small pocket of Cornwall, they've helped turn the corner and made something that is typically British, really British. Lovely.
The Cornish landscape is full of reminders of this region's proud heritage. Copper and tin mining dominated Cornish life until the early 20th century. Working in such perilous conditions, one thing was vital: faith. As Cornish mining expanded in the mid-18th century, a new branch of Christianity was emerging, one that's now part of the fabric of Cornish villages: Methodism. There are over 700 Methodist chapels in Cornwall, but the tiny hamlet of Busville became an unlikely focal point for the growth of Methodism, because it had its own unique congregation. The extensive mining activity underground had made the land sink and formed this hollow.
Heavens! What an extraordinary place.
Gwenap Pit was the perfect arena for the movement's founder and star performer, John Wesley. In his day, miners and their families came from far and wide to hear him preach. 20,000 at a time, packing into Gwenap Pit and the surrounding fields.
These stones were here, and he would probably stand here to preach. The terraces were built after his death, and I'm told that if you walk round each one by turn, you'll have walked a mile. So you can imagine an awful lot of people were here.
John Wesley was an inspirational evangelist. His fresh, enthusiastic preaching was a revelation to the poorest in Cornish society, to whom he offered hope.
The Church of England at the time seemed very remote and middle class here. So you can understand people who lived these ghastly lives, why Wesley had such an influence on them and an influence on Christianity in Cornwall.
Wesley preached here on no fewer than 18 occasions, and each time Gwenap Pit was packed.
Isn't it extraordinary? It's a perfect amphitheatre with a superb acoustic, which meant that when Mr. Wesley preached, everyone would be able to hear him.
Wesley helped make Cornwall the cradle of Methodism, and Gwenap Pit remains a monument to a period that did so much to shape Cornwall's villages.
It's still used today. All these rose petals you can see on the ground are in fact confetti. So someone very recently got married here. Lovely.
Next, I visit a Cornish community and become part of the strangest of branch meetings.
It's very high up there.
And discover the estuary villages with a unique boating tradition.
6, 7, oh, why didn't they keep still?
I'm in the far southwest reaches of our country, and already I've seen how the local villages embrace their many visitors. But I couldn't leave without coming to a star feature of this area, one of Cornwall's stunning estuaries. I'm heading to the Foy estuary, where the town of Foy and the villages of Polruan and Bodinnick line the water's edge. These small communities enjoy a fascinating relationship with each other and with their unique setting.
Morning.
It's 7 miles upstream to the nearest bridge, so the best way to explore around here is by boat.
I love ferries. I always have. I find them really rather romantic. What better way to travel? All along the landscape, in the sun, and getting from A to B. Long live the ferry.
I'm crossing one of Cornwall's great natural harbours. These deep waters have seen everything from tin to pilchards shipped out, and, in days of old, I dare say a fair amount of contraband smuggled in. For 5 centuries, there's been a ferry service between Foy and the village I'm heading to, Polruan. Here to meet me is Alan Toms, the ferry's current operator, and a boatman through and through.
It must be very important to the villagers in Polruan to have the ferry.
We take the school children across, and in my day we always hoped that the ferry wouldn't run so we didn't have to go to school, but our company seems to run all the time, so we're not that popular.
Lives here are shaped by these sheltered waters. and I've come to find out about a vessel that is unique to the Foy estuary. The charming Troy boat. Designed for racing, Troy boats have been built and sailed in this harbour since 1929. Sailors from all the local communities meet twice a week during the summer to race this exclusive class of yacht. But word is, over 50 years, ferry owner Alan has built quite a reputation.
I'm told you always win.
Not always, no.
Oh!
Most times.
What's your secret?
I always put it down to coming from poor earnings, really.
Yes.
Knowing the tides. We used to have the old men up on top of the hill watching it, and even if you won, they used to come down and say, well, if you'd done that, boy, you'd have been farther ahead. They push you on.
This is a popular spot for visitors, but Troy boats have remained the curious preserve of the locals. Only 28 have ever been built, which makes ownership of a Troy boat hard to come by. Just upstream, I'm heading to the tiny village of Badinnick, where one of these wooden Troy yachts is being restored by local boat builder Peter Williams.
I've known about these boats since I was this high, just because my granddad actually had one. Because there's not that many of them, it's quite hard to actually get a boat, because they don't come up for sale very often at all.
What is peculiar to them?
We're lucky to have quite a deep water estuary.
Right.
You wouldn't really want to be sailing these up around the sandbanks and places. They're just too deep. They've got quite a lot of sail area.
Right.
Quite a tall mast. You've got so much high hills here. It's very fluky winds. And that's one of the things that makes it exciting.
Peter spent his life working on these boats, but he doesn't get involved on the water.
There's always a fight between the best sailors. It's fiercely contested. And there's always an excuse.
For losing.
For losing.
There's a race this afternoon, so I'm returning to Foy and the race headquarters, which means another trip across the water. I'm in ferry heaven. Yippee!
This is Du Maurier country, by which I mean Daphne Du Maurier. She used to live there, in that house. She wrote a lot of her books here, and I should imagine she got a lot of inspiration by living in a wonderful place like this.
As a resident of Badinnick, Du Maurier would have watched these boats racing across the estuary. I'm heading to the Royal Foy Yacht Club to watch this Cornish sailing institution.
3, 2, 1.
They're off.
This scene has been played out here for the best part of a century.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7.
6, 7. Oh, why didn't they keep still? Keep still, we're counting you.
Somewhere among the jibs and spinnakers is boat T1, the original Troy, still looking wonderful. Life here is much changed since the Troys first raced in 1929. But they are still the way that people here come together and celebrate what they share in a quite stunning setting.
Well done, Alan!
So, ferry owner Alan remains Troy boat champion, for another week at least. There's one more village on my journey, and I may have saved the best till last. On the southern edge of Bodmin Moor is St Neot, which my guide says is one of the most attractive places in Cornwall. But today, something is most definitely afoot. St. Neot holds on to a rare tradition, but it's one that the whole of England can relate to. The English Civil War in the 1640s forced villagers everywhere to decide whether they were for or against the king. St. Neot was definitely for. So, for over 350 years, the village celebrated our monarchy by displaying a branch of English oak at the top of the church. An oak tree is where Charles II hid after he lost the Battle of Worcester. Here he evaded capture, and 10 years later, ultimately reclaimed the throne. Every May in St. Neot, it's time for a fresh branch.
The oak branch is coming in, so I'm getting out of the way. It's not a branch, it's half a tree.
March on!
Oak Apple Day was once widely celebrated on Charles II's birthday, but few places still mark the occasion today. With wonderful 17th century costumes, this event has taken on a life of its own.
I found out that the lady wearing green and black, see, that's Cornish tartan.
A great many villages display the sprig of oak leaf, the age-old symbol of royalist support. Once at the church, there's just the small matter of hauling the branch to the top.
Very high up there. It's got to the top.
Whether this still counts as royalist support, I'm not sure. But the more other communities consign Oak Apple Day to the past, the more I think it matters to the people of St. Neot.
God save the King! God save the King!
With that, everyone heads inside the church for a much-needed drink and a jolly good knees-up.
Everyone's in the church, dancing, drinking, eating, and having a jolly good time. So that's probably the reason the tradition still exists. And a splendid reason, too. During my time in Devon and Cornwall, I realized that tourists just dip their toe in the water, literally as well.
People quite rightly flock here, but to understand an area, you have to dip into people's lives, and that's what I found so fascinating. I've seen Crew Martin's sense of fun, and Clovelly's reinvention as a working visitor attraction, and a host of united communities, both past and present. This is a region that embraces its traditions and shares them all.
But I suppose my overwhelming impression is the sea. It's so much a part of the meaning and the existence down here. And I suppose it's made me realize more and more strongly that we are an island race, and all the better for it.
Next time, I'll see how the highest peaks in England have shaped life in the villages of Cumbria.
Trying to keep up with the sheep.
I'll see what brought wealthy Victorians to the region.
I'm actually steering, I want you to know.
and discover the origins of our love affair with the Lake District.
No wonder Wordsworth was inspired by this.
And Penelope's wandering lonely as a cloud next Tuesday night at 9. It's France we're fighting for on Friday night. A dangerous mission for Lily at 9 in our brand new drama, Resistance. Letting it all hang out tonight, though. Meet the residents of Britain's naked village next on More 4.